Hi there. My name is Lucas Weiss, and I am the host of the Weesesports Quarantine Chronicles. For today's episode, I'm joined by Zach Berman. Zach is the Philadelphia Eagles beat writer for The Athletic. In this episode, I chat with Zach about how he got into sports journalism, covering the Eagles for both the Philadelphia Inquirer and then The Athletic, and how he wrote his book Underdogs on that Super Bowl winning 2017 Eagles squad. In addition to YouTube, Weesesports Quarantine Chronicles is now on podcast form via Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So however you're listening to this content, make sure to like, watch, rate, and subscribe. This is episode 14 of the Weesports Quarantine Chronicles. All right, I'm pleased to be joined today on the Weesports Quarantine Chronicles by Zach Berman. He is in Philadelphia Eagles beat writer for The Athletic, as well as the author of Underdogs, the Philadelphia Eagles' emotional road to Super Bowl victory. Zach, welcome to the Weesports Quarantine Chronicles.
I appreciate it. Happy to be here.
And I wanted to start off because when doing research for this interview, I saw that you attended Germantown Academy in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, and your class voted you the best Philly fan. Did you ever think back then that you would now become a beat writer for one of the top 4 Philadelphia sports teams?
First off, that's great research. that really is good research. Yes. I mean, my goal back then was to become a sports reporter. So what I'm doing now. Now, the profession at the time was different, or it seemed different as a consumer than when you're in the business. You know, I did grow up a big Philly sports fan. I was reading the coverage in the Inquirer and the Daily News. And then, like, you know, when you get into the business, your perspective changes, your responsibility changes. So that fanaticism, you lose that over the years, certainly. But growing up, if you had told me that I'd be covering sports in Philadelphia, I'd say, where do I sign up? Because that's exactly what I wanted to do.
No, that's, you know, you make that point about losing your fanaticism a bit, because of course, once you become a journalist, you have to be objective. But we'll get into, you know, your time covering the Eagles in just a bit. But I wanted to start back by you wanting to pursue journalism at Syracuse. Mm-hmm. And for those Canadian listeners who are listening to this show, Syracuse is one of the top sports journalism programs in the world. And it's, you know, produced a lot of alumni like Bob Costas, Ian Eagle, Marv Albert, and you, Zach Berman. So I'm just curious, what did you learn at Syracuse that prepared you for the rest of your career in your industry?
Well, first off, you can't put me in their category. You know, the only thing I have in common with them is the degree, and we probably went into the same buildings. But I'm trying to reach where those guys are. And second, this is neat being on the Canadian show. My mom's Canadian. I have a lot of Canadian family, so
right on.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool too. So as for your question, in terms of Syracuse. I mean, there are a lot of benefits from going there. For me, what I would say is environmental, in the sense that you're around a lot of like-minded people. You're around a lot of competitive people. Certainly, the class itself, or the classes themselves, the campus newspaper, the campus radio station. Those are all really valuable, especially for me, the campus newspaper. That's where my formative experience really came from. But more than that, it was the people I was around at the campus newspaper, and the people I was around at the campus radio station, and the people I was around in those classes. That was the best part of going there for me, was that there were so many talented people, yes, but so many motivated people. We were like-minded in that sense. We all, or I shouldn't say we all, many of us wanted to do this, to be where we ended up. And I think that was very beneficial because when you're around motivated people, I mean, to cover the field hockey beat, that's competitive. You know, I mean, much less covering the football team or the basketball team. And then also you create an organic network. people that I knew when we were 18, 19, 20 years old. You go on, you're rising through the ranks in this business with them. You share a lot of the same experiences of failures, of successes, of aspiring for certain jobs, not getting other jobs. All those experiences, you're not alone in experiencing. So, I want to be careful not to come off as if you need to go to a place like Syracuse because there's so many different routes. But for me, it was where I wanted to go, and I really benefited from the experience that the campus offered, but especially being around so many talented people.
And you talk about the reps that you got while at Syracuse to practice your journalistic skills, and I'm sure that prepared you for the litany of jobs that you've had coming out of Syracuse. You were a sports reporter at the Washington Post, New York Giants beat writer at the Newark Star-Ledger, sports reporter at the Philadelphia Daily News. How did those experiences in those different markets help prepare you for when you got the opportunity to work at the Inquirer as the Philadelphia Eagles beat writer?
Sure. Well, I would say in any profession, in anything in life, you're the byproduct of your experiences. So you try to learn so much along the way. I could go job by job. For me, I was really lucky to get an opportunity at the Washington Post early on. I was an intern there, and it turned into something that extended thereafter. And I was covering the University of Virginia and Virginia Tech. So covering ACC football and ACC basketball, and learning how to be a beat writer. And I was around so many talented people, especially at the paper itself, that I could use as resources. And so learning from reading them, learning from being around them when I had those opportunities, and the editing that I had there, it was absolutely incredible. That experience, that was I was so lucky, so fortunate to be in that position. And those 2 years I had there were so critical for my career, and I absolutely loved it. But I wanted to cover the NFL, and after 2 years there, I had an opportunity to cover the NFL, as you said, with the Star Ledger covering the Giants, and that was an amazing opportunity, getting a chance to be an NFL beat writer, being around, in a big market, a very competitive market. My partner on the beat was Mike Garofolo, who is now at the NFL Network, and I learned so much from Mike, from observing him, but working next to him every single day, asking questions, having him kind of guide me in certain ways, and that was huge for me. But I'm from the Philadelphia area. I kind of aspired to do this in Philadelphia, hopefully plant roots in Philadelphia, and I got that opportunity in 2012. First off, it was a sports magazine that the Daily News was starting, and this was actually late 2011 into 2012, and it was a chance to return to Philly, B, write long-form stories, which I was very interested in doing, and C, there was a television component too that I really wanted to experience. So that was great, except the magazine didn't work out, and I was kind of left scrambling there. I freelanced for a bit with the New York Times, with some other places, and then I was lucky that the Eagles job came open in 2012 at the Philadelphia Inquirer. And that was really a dream-like situation for me. Like I said, I grew up reading the Eagles coverage in the Inquirer, and I've been covering the Eagles since 2012, like you said, at the Inquirer since then, and then I started at the Athletic this past year.
Yeah, just a very accomplished career, and you talked about how just the luck of it that the Eagles job would open at the Athletic, or the Inquirer, pardon me, for you to be a beat writer there to cover the Eagles. I'm just curious, Zach, how challenging is it, certainly when you first started covering and being a beat reporter for the Eagles, particularly in a market like Philly where those fans love their football? Like, being from Toronto, I think my sports fans are very passionate about hockey, but Philadelphia sports fans are on a whole other level.
Yeah, well, it's a good point. I grew up around it. My brothers fit into that category. My father-in-law now fits in that category. So I was exposed to it. I was exposed to it early on. But I would say, covering the Giants at the Star-Ledger, that's a big-time market, obviously. New York, the Giants are one of the high-profile teams in the NFL. My experience in Washington, even though the University of Virginia and Virginia Tech, they're not kind of the top beats in the sports section there. But, that's a rabid fan base. And really, any beat you cover, there's going to be interest. You're writing to that audience, and you're trying to grow that audience. But in terms of Philadelphia specifically, the passion of the fan base was the appeal to the job. That's why I wanted to do it. It certainly was not a concern. And like I said, I grew up around it. I was prepared for it at that time, and I love it every day. There's no better place to cover professional football than in Philadelphia.
I want to get to the 2017 season, and you wrote a great book, Underdogs. I highly recommend for any football fan listening to this to read that book, because that season was so amazing for a number of reasons. And I think for most football fans, they remember how Nick Foles comes in for the injured Carson Wentz, goes from backup quarterback to Super Bowl MVP, defeating Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. But when writing that book, Zach, was there another story that maybe football fans may not know or may not remember, but equally has as much impact in that magical season?
Yeah, so for me, the big part of that book was the characters and the moments that made that team special. The fact that I had been around the team since 2012. I covered Nick Foles as a rookie. I covered him when he had that 27 touchdown, 2 interception season in 2013. I covered him when he was traded to the Rams. So having that background with the players, same thing with Howie Roseman, who lost the player personnel control in 2015, got it back in 2016, and then helped build that Super Bowl roster. So really, I would say being able to humanize a lot of the characters around that team. I had seen so many of them have their underdog moments, if you will, where they were either down in their career or really struggling at a certain point, and being able to see them achieve kind of the ultimate success in the NFL, the perspective that I had, the range of reporting that I had, that's what I was particularly proud of in the book. It's not just about that season. It's about the characters and the moments that made that team special.
And you, of course, covered Super Bowl 52, Eagles, Patriots. And I'm curious as a reporter, because the Super Bowl is one of the biggest live sporting events on the sporting calendar. So many media are down there covering this game. How do you, amidst all the reporters and the journalists that were in Minneapolis for that Super Bowl, able to write thorough, effective, and engaging content?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I've been on the other side of it where I'm covering the Super Bowl and it's not the team that I cover, and it's a totally different experience. So the key in 2017 was the relationships that you have, number one, because you were around these guys every day, as I said, for a period of years. So you're not just jumping onto the scene. They know you, you know them, and that's a big advantage. And then also the context with which you're operating. You don't need to research something. You were there. I was in Los Angeles when Carson Wentz tore his ACL. I was in the locker room after Nick Foles struggled, against Oakland that year, or against the Giants that year. There were different moments that I got to see. It was Dallas that he struggled against, not the Giants. He played well against the Giants. But being there, having that type of context, that helps you when there's so many reporters on the scene. So I would say that it's a different experience if you're a national reporter. It's a different experience if you're kind of looking for local stories and you're covering the Super Bowl for an out-of-market paper. but for me, covering the team and being there throughout the entire process, that was my biggest advantage.
And there were so many memorable moments in that Super Bowl, the Philly special, the Graham strip fumble, even those reviews of some certain calls. And then it culminated with, of course, Philadelphia winning the Super Bowl. And you talked about those relationships that you built with those players, coaches, and personnel. Did that help you lead off the book with the Philadelphia Eagles locker room celebration after their Super Bowl win?
Yeah, I appreciate you referencing that. Did that help me? I mean, I don't know if I was in there specifically because I was a Philadelphia reporter, because I think anyone could go into the locker room, but certainly understanding the gravity of it and knowing how to operate in that moment. Because during the season, you're in the locker room every day and you're in the locker room after every game, but you're going in after the coach gives his speech, after the players have finished celebrating or they're kind of getting over a loss. The Super Bowl is a different animal. And I was in there before Doug Peterson gave his speech, and then when Doug Peterson gave his speech, and as Malcolm Jenkins is giving his speech. And when you're standing there, you're observing, you're a fly on the wall there. And what I realized in that moment was as I'm in the locker room during the post-game celebration, I'm not trying to get reaction. I'm trying to observe these guys celebrating. What are they doing? How are they experiencing this moment? What I'm trying to do there is capture this piece of history for everyone who's not in the locker room at the time. So there were plenty of opportunities before and after to get reaction. What I was trying to do then was observe.
And this championship meant so much to Philadelphia and the parade that happened afterwards. And I could certainly feel that because last year the Toronto Raptors won the franchise's first NBA championship. We won't bring up the series against Philadelphia. I promise I won't bring that up. The Kawhi Leonard was a year ago yesterday, just for those of you listening. But similar to the Raptors winning with the Eagles winning, you could just see how the city came together. And I'll never forget what the images of Philadelphia were like when they won that Super Bowl. I mean, I thought that the Raptors celebrating in the streets when they won the championship were off the charts, but Philadelphia was a completely different story.
Yeah, and that was part of it that I was really trying to capture. And the reality is, so I'm 34 right now. Was obviously 2 years younger at the time, and I understood the gravity of that moment. But certainly there have been people who've been Eagles fans for decades upon decades, and saw them lose the Super Bowl in the 1980 season, and saw them lose the Super Bowl in the 2004 season, and having won since 1960, and all the different times that they were close, and understanding the connection that the fans had with the team, what it meant in their families, what it meant in their communities. So yeah, you realize as you're doing it that it's pretty special. And honestly, when I was working at the Inquirer at the time, and I remember growing up and I would go to a breakfast place and you would see the newspaper from when they won the World Series in the 1980s. And I knew I was writing that story and I was chronicling that moment. And I viewed that as a major responsibility and really a big point in my career because of the responsibility of that moment.
My final question for you, Zach, revolves around your work now at The Athletic. You're still a Philadelphia Eagles beat writer, but at The Athletic. And I'm curious for you, was it challenging to transition from print to digital? And are there things that you can do now on the digital side as a reporter that you couldn't as a print journalist?
Yeah, so this is a good question because I obviously put a lot of thought into this. And I love the Inquirer. I mean, it was a place I had always wanted to work. I spent 7 seasons there and really appreciated it, and still I'm a subscriber to this day. But when The Athletic kind of came about, and it came in the Philadelphia market in 2017, and was really impressed by the concept and then the execution. And then when I saw the type of talent that they were hiring, was obviously really impressed by that as well. admired the work that they had. And I don't pay as much attention to the kind of the delivery mechanism, if you will, whether you're writing for newspaper or digital. You're trying to be a good storyteller. You're trying to write good stories. But there are fundamental differences, in particular with the lack of a hard deadline. We're at The Athletic, we're not turning that around to get it to a printing press. There aren't the same type of space constraints that you have when you're working, within the framework of a newspaper. And just it's a different. I guess there are differences there, and then also just the mission of The Athletic is, you're not trying to give kind of the news of the day in the way that I was often tasked at the Inquirer. There were differences in terms of how I went about my stories, the types of stories I was trying to tell. Really, you're looking to tell a story that's different than you can find anywhere else, or that's better than you can find anywhere else, and hopefully both. And that really appealed to me, especially at kind of that point in my career. So I would say going from the Inquirer to The Athletic in terms of the delivery mechanism, I wasn't as focused with that, but because I love the Inquirer and I love my responsibilities there, but it was all that The Athletic offered really in terms of the company, the mission, the people you're with. That was so appealing to me, and I'm thrilled to be working at the Athletic, obviously.
Zach Berman, he is a Philadelphia Eagles beat writer at The Athletic, author of Underdogs. Zach, thank you so much for joining me on the Weesports Quarantine Chronicles.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.